Before diving into this incredible story, remember to subscribe to the channel and turn on notifications. Here, every story has something to say, and you won't want to miss a single one. The private jet soared high above the ground, crossing the bright blue sky over Miami. Inside, the cabin exuded luxury: cream leather seats, plush carpeting, soft lighting, and impeccable service. Michael Harrington, an influential businessman in his 50s with impeccably styled graying hair, sipped his champagne while casting disdainful glances around him. He was convinced that everything in this world belonged to him. Just then, a flight attendant boarded, followed by a passenger who immediately caught everyone's attention. Vanessa Carter, an elegant black woman in her 40s, walked with calm confidence. Her dress was simple yet sophisticated, her hair perfectly styled, her gestures full of dignity. She carried a discreet but high-quality leather bag that hinted at her quiet success. Michael, without even trying to hide it, stared at her and sneered. He had never seen Vanessa before, but in his mind, she didn't belong there. It wasn't personal, just the usual prejudice he harbored against people outside his world. The hostess, complicit, approached Vanessa with an icy smile and said curtly, "Madam, I think you're in the wrong place." Vanessa looked up, a mixture of surprise and calm in her eyes. She didn't answer immediately. Her hands tightened for a moment on her bag, then she took a deep breath, controlling her anger and her dignity. Michael burst out laughing, a cruel laugh, and leaned towards the passengers around him. "Look at this, you see what I mean? These people think they can just walk in here like..." He didn't finish his sentence, but the message was clear. The other passengers remained silent, some uncomfortable, others too intimidated to intervene. Vanessa stood motionless, letting the words and glances pass over her as if she were invisible, but every fiber of her being was focused on controlling the situation. What Michael didn't know was that Vanessa Carter wasn't just a passenger. She was a successful entrepreneur, owner of several companies, and a respected philanthropist, capable of turning adversity into strength. But for now, she kept all of that to herself, hidden behind her apparent calm. The jet started up, the engines roared softly. Michael continued to laugh, convinced that the humiliation was complete, that he had demonstrated his superiority. But Vanessa, behind her mask of calm, mentally noted every detail, every condescending glance, every word of contempt. In that heavy silence, fate was preparing to turn against him. For sometimes, true power hides where it is least expected, and the humiliation inflicted on someone can return with a force that one never suspects. The jet touched down gently on the Miami runway. Michael Harrington, still convinced of his superiority, disembarked first, his arrogant smile plastered on his face. He turned one last time toward Vanessa Carter, imagining her lowering her eyes in humiliation, and everyone around her agreeing with him. But Vanessa descended with calculated slowness, each step exuding quiet confidence. Her eyes were fixed straight ahead, and despite Michael's disdain, she showed neither fear nor anger. The passengers who had witnessed the scene on the plane exchanged embarrassed glances. Some were uncomfortable, others whispered amongst themselves, but no one dared to intervene. Michael, unable to contain his arrogance, made a theatrical gesture towards her. "You see, everyone, this isn't your environment. You should learn your place." The flight attendant chuckled softly, reinforcing Michael's sense of superiority. But Vanessa calmly pulled out her phone. With a discreet gesture, she began filming the scene from her bag. She knew exactly what she was doing. Every word, every contemptuous gesture would be recorded. Every humiliation could be used against him. Michael suspected nothing. To him, Vanessa was just a passenger who could be crushed under the weight of her status and money. But Vanessa wasn't alone. Behind her, the silhouettes of the passengers who had finally dared to observe were visible, some with supportive glances. Even without saying a word, they sensed that something unjust was happening. Vanessa then calmly approached the exit, her phone still in her hand, and said in a soft but firm voice, "Every word counts. Every gesture is recorded. And one day, the truth will be known." Michael stared at her, speechless. He hadn't expected her to speak, much less appear so calm and powerful. The truth was beginning to seep into his world, silent but inexorable. As Michael stepped off the jet, an unfamiliar feeling washed over him, a shiver of unease. But he forced a smile and hid his discomfort. He still thought he was in control, that he had won. He didn't know that Vanessa Carter had just laid the first stone of her revenge, and that the next day, the whole world would be behind her. Sunlight streamed through the large bay windows of Michael Harrington's penthouse. The champagne from the night before hadn't been enough to erase the feeling of superiority he thought he possessed. He stretched, smiling at his reflection in the mirror, confident and convinced that the scene in the private jet would never become public knowledge. But what he didn't know was that Vanessa Carter had shared the video on her social media, accompanied by a simple yet powerful message. Every person deserves respect and dignity, regardless of where they are or who they are. Arrogance and racism will never remain invisible. Michael turned on the television to watch his usual programs and was suddenly frozen. The arrogant face he thought he didn't recognize was appearing in close-up on every local and national news channel. The headlines scrolled by. Private jet incident, businessman humiliates black passenger. Racism and arrogance exposed in luxury. Vanessa Carter, a woman who transforms humiliation into strength. His heart sank. His colleagues, his influential friends, his associates, all were being mentioned in articles and on social media. Vanessa's video had already garnered hundreds of thousands of views. The entire world was commenting on her humiliating behavior. Michael tried to rationalize it, it's just an exaggeration, it's not that serious. But the more he tried, the more the truth hit him. Every word from the journalist, every comment from internet users, resonated like an implacable judgment. Dozens of private messages from worried clients and partners were already starting to arrive, some were canceling appointments, others were demanding explanations. He turned on his phone and saw a flood of notifications. Vanessa Carter had been invited to several shows, and her statements were being shared widely. Her composure, her dignity, her strength in the face of Michael's arrogance captivated the public. The words, courage, integrity, and feminine power, kept coming up. Michael sat up, unable to move, feeling for the first time what it was like to lose control. The man who had always believed that money and power could buy anything understood that he had been overwhelmed by something he could not control, truth and social justice. Vanessa, for her part, had never sought revenge. Her only goal was to remind the world that every person deserves respect. But this simple act had toppled Michael Harrington from his throne of arrogance, publicly exposing his shame and weakness. That morning, Michael didn't laugh. He couldn't anymore. He had just discovered that true power did not reside in luxury or status, but in the dignity, patience, and courage of a woman he had thought was weak. And somewhere, in the quiet of his luxurious office, he knew that he had just received his first real-life lesson, a lesson he could never forget. Michael Harrington couldn't sleep that night. In his silent penthouse, every image from Vanessa Carter's video replayed endlessly in his mind. The cruel laughter he'd let out on the private jet echoed back at him like a humiliating replay. He'd thought he was in control, but now he felt powerless and ridiculed. The next morning, his phone buzzed incessantly. His assistants and colleagues bombarded him with calls. Some tried to calm him down, others informed him that he had to speak to the media before the situation escalated further. But Michael didn't know what to say. How could he explain behavior that the whole world saw as racist and contemptuous? Meanwhile, social media erupted. Hashtags like #RespectVanessa and #MichaelHumiliated were trending. Internet users commented on the video with outrage. Some denounced the racism, others praised Vanessa's courage. Every mention of her name fueled the scandal, and Michael began to feel the weight of shame paralyzing him. His business partners called to cancel meetings, investors demanded explanations, and the media began contacting him. His once prosperous and unassailable companies were now weakened by his public behavior. Every decision he made seemed tainted by a past he couldn't erase. Meanwhile, Vanessa, ever calm and dignified, received invitations to interviews and conferences. She explained intelligently and eloquently that the humiliation she had suffered did not define her, but rather revealed the moral fragility of those who abused their status. Her words inspired thousands of people and reinforced her image as a strong and respected woman. Michael found himself in his office, his hands trembling, facing a world he thought he controlled, but which now rejected him. He understood that his arrogance and contempt had irreversible consequences. His reputation, built on money and power, was visibly eroding, while Vanessa, through her sheer dignity, was consolidating her legitimacy and influence. For the first time, Michael felt fear of losing everything he had, fear that his name would forever be associated with humiliation and shame. And within that fear, a simple but devastating truth dawned: he had underestimated Vanessa Carter. And what he had thought would be a victory on the private jet had turned into a painful and unforgettable public lesson. Michael Harrington stood by his office window, looking down at the city below, but his eyes saw nothing. Every light, every skyscraper, seemed to reflect his shame back at him. The whole world had seen what he thought was a mere moment of superiority, and now he had become a laughingstock. The calls from his business partners came in relentlessly. Some demanded explanations, others were ending long-standing collaborations. His employees murmured in the hallways, some with pity, others with judgment. Even his family began to avoid him, embarrassed by the news spreading everywhere. Michael opened his phone and saw the notifications. Vanessa Carter was everywhere. The media portrayed her as a symbol of dignity and black female power. Her talks and interviews were being streamed live on social media. Every word she uttered highlighted his own arrogance, turning what he had thought was a victory into a public disaster. He tried to justify himself, to rationalize his actions. It was just a joke, no one really took it badly, but even his own thoughts seemed to mock him. Every sentence he had uttered on the jet, every contemptuous gesture, returned like a stab in the back. He felt humble before the world, and that humiliation could not be erased by money or power. Michael understood, too late, that true power did not reside in wealth or social status. True strength lay in dignity, in the courage to remain calm in the face of injustice, and in the ability to transform humiliation into leverage. Vanessa Carter embodied this strength, and every act he committed against her only reinforced her image in the public eye. That morning, Michael Harrington felt a bitter, profound, and irreversible regret. The lesson he had just received was not theoretical, it was etched into the collective memory and into his own. And as he curled up in his office, unable to smile or laugh, he finally understood a simple but devastating truth: in his quest for domination, he had met someone who would never be crushed, and the whole world had seen it. The weeks that followed were a whirlwind for Michael Harrington. Media scandals piled up, investors pulled out, and business partners looked the other way. Every move he made seemed to reinforce his public image of arrogance and racism. The world he thought he controlled was crumbling, and he had no one to blame but himself. Meanwhile, Vanessa Carter's life took on a whole new dimension. The media sought her out for interviews and speaking engagements on leadership, courage, and resilience. She had transformed the humiliation she had suffered into a demonstration of strength and influence. Her video had inspired thousands of people, and her reputation as a dignified and powerful woman grew stronger every day. In an interview broadcast live on several national channels, Vanessa stated, "Arrogance and contempt can never erase a person's dignity. What we experience as injustice can become our strength if we choose to remain calm, intelligent, and determined." Every word resonated as a universal truth. Social media erupted, praising her courage and condemning Michael's behavior. The hashtag #RespectVanessa went viral, and she was invited to speak at schools, conferences, and forums on equality and female leadership. Michael, for his part, had disappeared from media and social circles. He was no longer the self-assured man he had thought he was on the private jet. His arrogance had given way to bitterness and shame. Even his closest friends and colleagues were distancing themselves, worried about their own reputations. Vanessa, for her part, continued to shine, transforming every challenge into an opportunity. She demonstrated that true power is not measured by money or social status, but by dignity, courage, and the ability to inspire others. Her humility in the face of provocation, her quiet strength, and her capacity to turn injustice into influence made her an example the world would long remember. Thus, what had begun as a humiliating experience on a private jet became a resounding victory. Michael Harrington had lost, not only in the eyes of the public, but also in the eyes of his own conscience. And Vanessa Carter, with her composure, intelligence, and dignity, had proven that true power belongs to those who know how to remain strong, even when everything seems to be crushing them.